On The Young and the Restless Recap Wednesday, for the 4th of March 2026, the most explosive confrontations do not always happen in boardrooms or courtrooms. Sometimes they unfold quietly over coffee at Crimson Lights, where truth slips out between concern and guarded politeness. The upcoming exchange between Sharon Newman and Daniel Romalotti Jr. carries that exact tension, soft on the surface, razor sharp underneath. Sharon is not approaching Daniel as an adversary, at least not openly. She is approaching him as a mother who knows her daughter is unraveling and who senses that time is not on their side. Daniel's first instinct when he sees Sharon is genuine concern. He asks about Mariah Copeland, not as gossip, not as obligation, but as someone who still cares about the fallout affecting everyone connected to her. Sharon does not sugarcoat the reality. Mariah is struggling. Recovery will not be quick. Stability will not be immediate. There is something heartbreaking about Sharon's admission that Mariah cannot do this alone, that she needs her wife, her child, her family. It is not manipulation, it is belief. Sharon genuinely thinks that love and proximity are part of the solution. From her perspective, the fracture in Mariah's marriage is not just emotional damage, it is a barrier to healing. But Sharon is perceptive. She has noticed the shift between Daniel and Tessa Porter. Their closeness is no longer subtle. Grief has a way of binding people together, especially when they feel equally displaced by the same crisis. Sharon's question about their relationship is calm but deliberate. She does not accuse. She observes, and that makes it harder for Daniel to deflect. When he admits that they started as friends but have become more, it confirms what Sharon already suspected. There is no triumph in her reaction, only concern layered with disappointment. Daniel's honesty about the evolution of his connection with Tessa feels raw rather than defensive. He insists it was never planned, never strategized. It grew in the space left by Mariah's collapse. There is something tragically human about that. Neither he nor Tessa sought romance in the middle of chaos. It happened because they were there for each other. But Sharon's mention of Tessa filing for divorce lands heavily. Divorce makes things real. It removes the safety net of temporary. It signals finality. Sharon clings to hope. She believes that once Mariah stabilizes, once her mental and emotional health improve, there may still be room for reconciliation. It is a mother's optimism, perhaps even denial. Sharon has survived enough personal catastrophes to know that broken things can sometimes be rebuilt. But Daniel's unspoken question hangs in the air. How long is Tessa supposed to wait? Healing timelines are unpredictable. Emotional exhaustion has limits. Daniel sees the toll this has taken on Tessa. He understands that asking her to suspend her own happiness indefinitely may not be fair. Meanwhile, across town, another emotional reset begins. Claire Grace Newman takes steps toward peace rather than escalation. Her decision to reconcile with Audra Charles signals maturity. Their tension, fueled by rivalry and suspicion, had reached a boiling point. But Claire appears to recognize that carrying resentment serves no one. Making peace with Audra is not surrender. It is clarity. She does not need another adversary. And perhaps she senses that Audra's battles are already heavy enough. That reconciliation frees Claire emotionally to address unfinished business with Kyle Abbott. Their history is complicated but not toxic. There is unfinished affection there, layered with hesitation and mistiming. Claire's breakup with Holden Novak has shifted her perspective. Holden represented intensity without stability. Kyle represents familiarity with the potential for growth. When Claire and Kyle sit down for their serious conversation, it will not be about nostalgia, it will be about definition. Where do they stand? Is there something real to rebuild, or have they simply circled each other for too long without committing? Kyle, for all his emotional caution, may finally be in a place where clarity is possible. He has watched Claire move through chaos. He has watched Audra's presence complicate matters. If Claire approaches him now seeking honesty, he will have to respond in kind. Their decision will likely hinge on whether they are ready to choose each other deliberately rather than by default. Then there is Sienna Bacall, who enters the equation with news that could further destabilize Tessa's emotional footing. Sienna has always operated with quiet awareness. Whatever update she brings to Tessa, whether personal, professional, or relational, it will land at a time when Tessa is already fragile. If Sienna's information connects to Noah, to shifting loyalties, or to broader Newman tensions, it could intensify Tessa's internal conflict. Tessa is already navigating divorce, guilt, and unexpected romance. Another complication might push her toward decisive action. What fascinates me about this cluster of storylines is how interconnected they are through vulnerability rather than rivalry. Sharon is fighting for her daughter's survival. Daniel is questioning how long patience can stretch before it becomes self-sacrifice. Tessa is torn between loyalty to the woman she married and the man who currently steadies her. Claire is choosing reconciliation over pride. Kyle stands at a crossroads of emotional clarity. And Sienna's impending news threatens to tip an already delicate balance. There are no clear villains in this arc, only people trying to cope with consequences. Sharon may appear protective to the point of denial, but she is acting from love. Daniel may appear impatient, but he is advocating for Tessa's right to move forward. Tessa may seem conflicted, but she is grieving a version of her life she no longer recognizes. Claire's forgiveness may look sudden, but it reflects growth. Even Audra, often positioned as strategic and guarded, benefits from Claire's olive branch. If Mariah stabilizes, Sharon's faith in family unity might feel justified. If she does not, Daniel's quiet doubts will grow louder. If Claire and Kyle redefine their connection, it could ripple into Audra's emotional orbit once again. And if Sienna's news shifts Tessa's perspective, the fragile triangle between her, Daniel, and Mariah could finally tip into irreversible territory. In Genoa City, change rarely happens with fireworks. It happens in conversations like the one at Crimson Lights, measured, emotional, quietly transformative. The real question is not whether relationships will shift. It is whether those involved are prepared to accept the consequences of finally telling the truth about what they want. In The Young and the Restless, emotional confrontations rarely explode, they simmer. They unfold in half-answered questions, in pauses that linger too long, in words that mean more than they admit. The exchange between Sharon Newman and Daniel Romalotti, Jr. at Crimson Lights, carries that exact weight. When Sharon finally says that Tessa feels like a daughter to her, and that this entire situation is tearing her apart, it is not theatrics, it is raw truth. Sharon has always extended her maternal instincts beyond bloodlines. Tessa married into her family, yes, but emotionally she became something deeper, another child she wanted to protect, guide, and shelter. Watching Tessa drift away while Mariah unravels feels like losing two daughters at once. Daniel, already stretched thin by guilt he never intended to carry, reacts with blunt honesty. If Sharon's goal was to make him feel responsible, then she has succeeded. His words are not accusatory, they are exhausted. He did not plan to fall for Tessa. He did not orchestrate emotional proximity. He stepped into a vacuum created by crisis. But Sharon quickly insists that guilt is not her intention. That denial, however sincere, does not erase the implication. The room holds tension neither of them fully names. When Daniel asks the inevitable question, does she want him to stop, Sharon does not answer. And that silence is louder than any argument, because the truth is complicated. Part of her likely does want him to step back, to allow space for Mariah and Tessa to find their way back to each other. But another part of her understands that you cannot demand someone suspend their happiness indefinitely for the possibility of recovery. Sharon's refusal to respond reveals internal conflict. She is torn between loyalty to her daughter and fairness to two adults navigating an impossible situation. Elsewhere, at Chancellor Park Cafe, fate arranges a quieter, but equally pivotal meeting. Tessa Porter runs into Sienna Bacall, and the atmosphere is markedly different, lighter on the surface, but layered underneath. Sienna announces she has decided to remain in Genoa City. Noah Newman's love anchored her. It convinced her that stability here outweighs any temptation to leave. There is certainty in her tone. She believes in the solidity of what she and Noah share. That certainty contrasts painfully with Tessa's uncertainty. When Sienna gently inquires about Tessa and her wife, the fairy tale comparison lands hard. Tessa admits she will not be getting that kind of ending. There is no bitterness in her voice, only realism. Mariah is distant, conversations are fragmented or non-existent. The emotional bridge between them feels eroded. Tessa confesses that the happiness Sienna describes, the warmth, the safety, the mutual grounding, is no longer something she recognizes in her own marriage. Things have changed too much. Trauma shifted the architecture of their connection, and neither of them seems able to restore it. When Daniel arrives, the energy shifts again, this time towards something lighter. Sienna mentions that she and Noah are planning to open another shadow room within town, expanding their vision. The idea feels symbolic: new space, new stage, new beginning. She asks Daniel if he performs, and the small moment of misalignment, his denial overlapping with Tessa's affirmation, results in shared laughter. It is effortless, natural. Sienna observes their chemistry with curiosity rather than judgment. On stage, she suggests, they would likely be magnetic. The implication is clear: their harmony is visible even to outsiders. That observation lingers after Sienna leaves. Because chemistry, once acknowledged, becomes harder to ignore. Tessa may still carry love for Mariah, but she cannot deny the ease she feels with Daniel. It is not just comfort, it is understanding without explanation. And that can be intoxicating. Meanwhile, in a different corner of Genoa City's social map, another reconciliation unfolds with surprising composure. Audra Charles opens the door to society and finds Claire Grace Newman standing there. The interaction could have been icy. Instead, it carries a subtle recalibration. Audra jokes that she is surprised Claire did not have the door slammed in her face, a pointed acknowledgement of their past hostility, but she quickly pivots to neutrality. There is no appetite for further conflict. Claire's response is even more telling. She states plainly that she no longer cares about what happened in Los Angeles. That statement is less about Audra and more about Claire herself. She is done carrying resentment from events that no longer serve her growth. Whether that signals maturity or strategic detachment remains to be seen, but it undeniably shifts the dynamic. The rivalry loses oxygen when one participant refuses to feed it. What strikes me about this convergence of scenes is how much they revolve around choice rather than confrontation. Sharon chooses silence instead of ultimatums. Daniel chooses honesty over defensiveness. Tessa chooses vulnerability in admitting her marriage feels altered. Sienna chooses love over uncertainty. Claire chooses neutrality over hostility. Audra chooses composure over ego. And yet, beneath those choices, instability hums. If Tessa continues recognizing emotional compatibility with Daniel, the divorce may become less theoretical and more inevitable. If Sharon continues avoiding direct answers, tension with Daniel may resurface in sharper form later. If Sienna and Noah's new shadow room thrives, it could become a symbolic contrast to Tessa's fading marriage. If Claire and Audra maintain neutrality, it may free Claire emotionally to revisit unresolved feelings elsewhere, perhaps with Kyle Abbott, whose own romantic trajectory remains fluid. The subtle brilliance of this stretch of story is that no one is yelling. No one is plotting overt sabotage. Instead, relationships are shifting through acknowledgement. And sometimes that is more destabilizing than any dramatic explosion. Sharon's silence, Tessa's confession, Daniel's laugh. Claire's detachment. These are not loud moments, but they are transformative ones. Genoa City does not always fracture through scandal. Sometimes it fractures through realization. On The Young and the Restless, truces are rarely clean, and peace is almost always temporary. When Audra Charles tilts her head and asks whether this is really the end, a ceasefire, nothing more, her tone carries both skepticism and calculation. She has never trusted surface resolutions, especially not in a city where alliances shift as quickly as stock prices. When she presses Claire Grace Newman about whether she is truly finished with Holden Novak, it is not idle curiosity, it is reconnaissance. Claire's response is calm but firm. She cannot stay with a partner who is dishonest. There is no melodrama in her voice, just clarity. She adds that she has ended things with both men, an admission that reframes everything just as Kyle Abbott walks in, and inadvertently becomes the silent punctuation mark to that statement. When Kyle and Claire sit down together, there is an ease between them that feels almost nostalgic. They begin sketching out tentative plans, future dinners, outings, the kind of low-pressure reconnection that suggests hope rather than desperation. It is subtle, but it is real. And from across the room, Holden notices. He slides onto a bar stool beside Audra, watching the scene unfold with a tight, knowing expression. Audra remarks that Claire appears to be backing off, perhaps stepping away from intensity in favor of comfort. But her gaze lingers a fraction too long on Kyle and Claire's shared laughter. Holden catches it. He asks whether she is jealous, not mockingly, but directly. Audra deflects at first, but Holden presses, urging honesty. There is a sharp intelligence in his suggestion that they could help each other, that mutual ambition and unresolved emotions could be leveraged strategically. He frames it as partnership, as efficiency. If Claire is drifting back toward Kyle, perhaps they can redirect the board. Audra's silence at that proposal says more than a rebuttal would. She does not commit, but she does not reject the idea either. Holden thrives in emotional gray zones, and he senses that Audra's composure is thinner than she pretends. Whether jealousy motivates her or not, the possibility of being sidelined irritates her pride. And Holden, always adept at spotting fractures, understands that pride can be a powerful entry point. Meanwhile, at Newman Enterprises, a far more consequential negotiation unfolds. Kane Ashby arrives not to argue, but to remind Phyllis Summers of the arrangement he once floated. He asked for her help to regain his family, to stabilize the chaos that spiraled outward. Phyllis, arms metaphorically crossed, admits she has considered his proposal, but doubts that Victor Newman would fall for something so simple. Victor is not naive, he anticipates deception. Kane does not deny that. Instead, he shifts strategy, incremental moves. Step by step, return Chancellor to the Newman family first. Restore order publicly, then adjust the rest quietly. Phyllis's resistance sharpens when she brings up Billy Abbott. Returning control would destabilize him profoundly. Kane dismisses Billy as collateral and unintended casualty in a larger restoration. But that dismissal unsettles Phyllis. For all her ruthlessness, she draws certain personal lines. Billy may not be perfect, but she refuses to knowingly destroy him. Kane counters by appealing to unity. They started this disruption together. They should finish it aligned. It is a clever reframing. Shared responsibility equals shared obligation. Phyllis, however, does not move without leverage. She asks what she gains. If she informs Victor directly and smooths this transition, Kane will owe her. The word "owe" carries weight in Genoa City. Debts are currency. Kane, recognizing her need for tangible benefit, offers something more personal. He will speak to Daniel Romalotti, Jr. on her behalf. That promise lands differently. Corporate maneuvering. Phyllis can survive. Estrangement from Daniel cuts deeper. The negotiation shifts from empire to motherhood in a single beat. If Kane can persuade Daniel to forgive her to reopen the door that has been slowly closing, then the cost of returning control becomes less devastating. Phyllis does not immediately agree, but she sets the condition clearly. If Kane truly succeeds in convincing her son to forgive her, then they have a deal. Kane leaves the building with characteristic focus, boarding his train like a man transitioning from theory to execution. He calls Daniel, instructing him to meet. The request is not optional in tone. Then, he calls Phyllis again, expressing quiet confidence. He believes he can reach Daniel where she cannot. There is something almost audacious about that claim, yet Kane understands leverage. Daniel's loyalty to family, his frustration, his internal conflict, these are angles Kane intends to navigate. When Phyllis tells him that if he can truly make Daniel forgive her, the agreement stands, she is not bluffing. She is prioritizing her child over control, at least hypothetically. And that, in its own way, is growth or desperation. What fascinates me about this convergence of events is how layered every interaction is. Audra and Holden circle each other like strategists considering a merger of convenience. Claire and Kyle tentatively explore rekindled stability. Kane manipulates outcomes with long-term vision. Phyllis calculates cost against emotional repair. No one is operating purely from love or purely from ambition. Everything is intertwined. Holden's suggestion that he and Audra could help each other achieve what they want hints at future disruption. Kane's promise to influence Daniel hints at emotional fallout. Phyllis's willingness to trade power for forgiveness signals vulnerability she rarely exposes. In Genoa City, ceasefires are rarely permanent, debts are never simple, and forgiveness is the most expensive currency of all.